This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast, the show that unpacks fantasy, faith, and life. I'm Bryce Johnson with Harrison Zuckerberg, and we are your fantasy coaches here to encourage you and help you win while finding meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. We won't always be right, but we hope we'll be convincing as we provide fantasy advice and biblical encouragement. I'm coming to you from the Unpacking It Ministry studio in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hope you're doing great today. It was a fun, wild fantasy weekend. There was one game in particular that we have to break down in our fantasy shenanigans segment, so we'll do that shortly. Also, a number of players that are intriguing on the waiver wire this week. There's always the potential for a league winner at this point in the year. And so what rookie players are going to start getting an opportunity second half of the season that emerge even sometimes out of nowhere. How about a running back in Baltimore? Could he be that guy? We'll talk about him. And a number of wide receivers getting more involved in their offenses and a lot of tight ends. Man, we were worried about tight ends early in the year. Lately, though, the depth at the position is impressive. But what about some of the elite tight ends? Where was Travis Kelce this week? What? Did he not jump on the flight to Germany? I mean, what are we doing here? So he cost me a win this week. I will say that. So that was a bummer. So we got a lot to get to today. If you have any comments or questions or thoughts, you can leave those anywhere you're watching this right now. Encourage you to check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Check out all of our content. If you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, be sure to check that out as well. And if you have yet to become a member of Fantasy Football Fellowship, make sure you do that, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. So as we begin the show each week, we take a look at the weekly Breakout Topic, where we take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to our own lives. And today, the topic is your team is so good. All right. How about that? Here we go. So one of the main reasons we play fantasy football is to win, right? We want to win the whole thing. The glory is in the championship, this fantasy ring. That's what we play for. But part of it, when we play with our buddies, family members, coworkers, we also want to prove that we are good at fantasy football kind of all season long, right? We want to make draft selections, waiver wire pickups, start certain guys in certain weeks that warrant or create a response from other managers in the league. This is part of the fun of playing, right? Here are some things we love hearing. That was a great pick. I wanted that guy. Awesome pickup on waivers. I tried to get him too. Your team is so good, it's ridiculous. Amazing trade. I can't believe you pulled that off. You got the steal of the draft. Your ability to identify sleepers that break out is impressive. We love the compliments. We want to hear the encouragement throughout the season. And so we want other fantasy managers to acknowledge that we're skilled, that we're knowledgeable, and we like to gain the approval of our league mates. It's rewarding. We like the applause. We like the recognition. We want other people to notice, what we're doing throughout the season. And so when it comes to our own lives, beyond fantasy football, on one end, it is excellent to get encouragement from others, right? It keeps us going. We love compliments. We love the approval. We love recognition for, how we're doing at work or how we're doing raising our kids or, acknowledging our accomplishments just in life and even noticing the nice things that we do in life. All of that is great. We enjoy it. But ultimately, whose approval are we pursuing and what motivations are behind it? So when it comes to fantasy, is it just about the approval of everyone else, or is it about winning a championship? What are we playing fantasy football for? Probably a number of reasons. But in our own lives, are we living our life just for the approval of others? That everything we do is kind of thinking about, sometimes we don't even admit this or realize it. Is it just to get the applause? Is it just to get the recognition? Are we doing nice things just so people will take notice and say, oh, wow, you're a really nice guy? Or is our motivation truly to honor God, to please God, to bring him glory? And so are we pleasing God or man? That's the question today. And we have to, each of us, evaluate that. And so the Apostle Paul, he asks this question, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ. So that's Galatians 1:10. And then in John 12:42-43, is the Amplified version. It speaks of the religious leaders in Jerusalem and says, nevertheless, even many of the leading men believed in him, Jesus, as Savior and Messiah. But because of the Pharisees, they would not confess it for fear that if they acknowledged him openly, they would be put out of the synagogue, excommunicated, for they loved the approval of men more than the approval of God. And so what about you and I? Do we believe in Jesus, but we're worried more about what others think than what he thinks? And so we need to consider whether or not we're chasing after the approval of others more than God. And again, it's nice to get encouragements and compliments from other people and for people to recognize and acknowledge. All of that is good. But is that more important to us? Is that our motivation in life? Or are we living each day to please God, to honor God? And are our motivations pure? That it's not just for the applause, for the acknowledgement of other people, but it's really to be obedient to God because we love him. It's out of response to the love that he's shown us, and we respond in the way that we live our lives in loving others. And so Colossians 3:23-24 tells us, whatever you do, whatever your task may be, work from the soul. That is, put in your very best effort as something done for the Lord and not for men, knowing with all certainty that it is from the Lord, not from men, that you will receive the inheritance, which is your greatest reward. It is the Lord Christ whom you actually serve. So that's who we really are serving. That as followers of Jesus, we are serving him. We are living for him. We are living to bring him glory and to honor him. And so one other verse I'll share, Matthew 6:1, it says, be very careful not to do your good deeds publicly to be seen by men. Otherwise, you'll have no reward prepared and awaiting you with your Father who is in heaven. So we don't do good things just to be seen by men. No, we do good things because we love God, we love people. And so it's not all about the applause and the recognition. So the other piece of this too is we should encourage one another. So we don't need to hold back from giving and receiving encouragement because we need this in life. It's important. And so in fantasy, yeah, it's nice to hear, hey, great job, great pickup, nice trade, way to go. We love hearing it. Hey, all right, that's a little boost for the day. But in life to say, hey, you're doing a great job. And most importantly, encouraging one another in the faith and encouraging one another to keep going. Hey, man, you know what the Bible says, and sending a verse specific to whatever someone might be going through and encouraging them who in who they are in the Lord and who we are in the Lord. That's the best encouragement. Hey, keep going. God loves you. Keep going. God's got you. Keep going. Rely on God's strength. Hey, keep trusting God. We need to hear that encouragement. So compliments are nice. Hey, you're great. Okay. God's great. And reminding them and encouraging them in the Lord. So that's the last piece of this. And so it says in let's see what verse. Yeah, 1 Thessalonians 5:9 through, I'll read 11. So encourage each other and build each other up just as you are already doing. So let's keep doing it. Let's not hesitate to encourage each other and build each other up. And then when we receive that, let's not let it get to us to where then pride takes over. Let's remain humble and let's be encouraged in who God is in us and what he's doing through us and give him the glory, that we respond and point it all back to him. So that's the encouragement for us today. Let's keep that proper perspective, the proper motivation, and keep the humility as we continue to do his will and honor him in all that we do. So we start there today. And so we love the fantasy compliments as well. And so in just a little bit, we'll get to our accountability and confession segment where we acknowledge some of the good moves that we made. And then we need a little bit of encouragement as we confess some of the mistakes that we've made or some of the players that have let us down a little bit. But we begin with some fantasy shenanigans with Harrison as we welcome him to the show today. And Harrison, I want to begin with Monday Night Football. The shenanigans first that took place, and let me play the open here.
Fantasy shenanigans.
The shenanigans that took place on the broadcast that I watched. I always watch the Manning cast. It's fantastic. But Arnold Schwarzenegger was on with the Manning brothers last night, and it was absolutely hilarious. I was laughing out loud. I didn't know what to expect because Arnold's just a character. He's a legend. Eli called him an icon, and he delivered. Like, they were throwing some crazy stuff at him, and his responses were strong, and just the interaction was funny. So I was dying there. And then the shenanigans of the game, the fact that Justin Herbert threw no touchdowns. He scored hardly any fantasy points across all of my leagues. And I went all in on Justin Herbert this year, and he's been awesome. He's been one of the top quarterbacks. I love it. But this week, it was the Austin Eckler show, getting into the end zone, and then they had the punt return as well. So he cost me some leagues. Justin Herbert cost me some leagues this week. So definitely some shenanigans there. Anything did you take away from that game as we kick this off?
Yeah, I mean, luckily for the Chargers, the Jets' offense is just as bad, if not worse, than how they were performing last night. So they did not really need to score points in order to get a win there, which, I don't think we're going to see another game from Justin Herbert where he has like 60 passing yards going into the fourth quarter. And they're winning at least.
That's right.
But for me, the biggest takeaway was Josh Palmer was placed on IR before the game started this weekend, elevating Quentin Johnson, the rookie wide receiver at TCU, to the number two, like solidified number two guy in that offense behind Keenan Allen. And I was hoping, I picked up Quentin Johnson this weekend. He was on my bench, but I was hoping that we could see the breakout game that we wanted to see from him. Is he going to be a stud moving forward? And unfortunately, the jury is still out. Had a pretty quiet game, but honestly, everyone outside of Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen had a pretty quiet game. So we'll have to wait to see now, could he be a guy moving forward that could win you your league at the end of the year? Because he's still on a lot of waivers. I think he's only rostered in about 40% of leagues still somehow after his breakout, 2 weeks ago. But he is the number two guy in that offense. Obviously, Eckler plays a large role in the passing offense, but as a downfield threat, Herbert trying to air out the ball, it's going to be Quentin Johnson for the rest of the year. We just need to see it.
That's a great point. And unfortunately, Josh Palmer is on my IR as well. So devastating. But Quentin Johnson, absolutely worth picking up. Johnston, worth picking up and even buying low in a trade. I think that's worthwhile. So I'm with you on that. All right. So some of the other shenanigans across the league, some interesting games took place. And I've got to start with the Texans and the Bucks. And I found myself watching this a lot. It was on the red zone because it was nonstop scoring. And down the stretch in that game, it could have gone either way. It was back and forth. It was wild. But let's think about this. So CJ Stroud led all quarterbacks this week, 41 fantasy points, 5 passing touchdowns. Even Baker Mayfield, 19 points. He was a top 10 QB this week. But Rachaad White, number one running back this week in PPR, almost 28 points. And then from waivers to my starting lineup, Cade Otton, 20 points, 2 touchdowns for him. It was huge. So that was great. And then Noah Brown, wide receiver for the Texans, he had 27 points. Tank Dell was lighting it up. He had 29.6 points. So it was a wild game, especially for Houston, scoring all those points and touchdowns. A lot of shenanigans there. What jumped out to you from that one?
For me, the biggest shenanigans from that game is, unfortunately for Panthers fans, it seems like CJ Stroud is going to be the best QB from this draft. Not only should he be rookie of the year this year, but dare I say he should maybe be MVP. Like, it's hard to find another QB who's contributing as much to his team winning as CJ Stroud is right now. Wow. He is unbelievable. That fourth quarter drive that he led with 40 seconds left, all the Bucs players were celebrating. Baker Mayfield was doing his little dance, and it was like, hold up, there's still 40 seconds left. Don't count out CJ Stroud yet. Dot, 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 all the way down the field for a touchdown. Unbelievable. He looked like Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers out there. And from fantasy implications, I mean, I did not think that going into the season, you would be saying, hop on the Texans bandwagon. Anyone that you can get on the Texans, get them on your roster. I know you were a fan of Nico Collins. Some people like Dameon Pierce, but I would never be running to the waiver wire to grab Noah Brown, the fourth receiver on the Texans. But that's what I'm doing right now. Anyone who is on the Texans that's on waivers, even Dara Goombawale, because, he might come in and kick some field goals for them. Who knows? That's 3-4 points. Go get them on your roster. It is completely worth it. You could probably start them every week because they are going to be scoring points and a lot of points.
Yes, absolutely. And so here at Fantasy Football Fellowship, we run a 32-team league, and where you own one NFL roster. The team that I chose this year, the Houston Texans. Huge day. So I'm in contention in the AFC South, playing well. Of course, Jacksonville's having a great season as well. But anyway, so I'm fired up for the Texans. Very impressive. And we'll get to some more confession later, just as we're talking about the Bucs, though. I will confess, I did not believe in Rachaad White. And most of the fantasy community didn't either. There were very few people that went all in. I listened to fantasy radio, all that kind of thing. And people just kind of poo-pooed Rachaad White. Well, the numbers are there. He's been a consistent RB2. He's been healthy. He gets the volume. He gets catches. He scores touchdowns. He's been solid for you. So I was wrong on him, and we'll see if he keeps it going. But because the Bucs, things could unravel potentially. Like, I know they played well, but as the season the second half of the season, I just wonder what direction they'll go. It could go more south, I guess. But White, either way, has been solid. The other crazy game, the Minnesota Vikings, Joshua Dobbs. I mean, another guy that I totally wrote off. I thought it was crazy when Arizona traded for him. And then I thought it was crazy that Arizona traded him to Minnesota last week. I thought the Vikings were done. So you were right on this one. I got to give it to you. They go get Dobbs. They play well. The offense still kind of looks the same, really. Madison had a good game. We'll get to Akers in a moment. But what'd you make of Dobbs and the Vikings?
Yeah, I mean, I called it last week on the show that watch out for the Vikings. I think they're going to make a move at QB. I don't think they're just going to throw in the towel this year. And they get Dobbs, and he just continues to do what he's done all season. 3 different teams in one season.
Gosh.
Had success on all of them, which is crazy. And yeah, the offense kind of felt the same. Maybe Justin Jefferson will come back this week. We'll see how he fits into that, and if Dobbs is, going to feature him heavily. But the craziest part about this game to me was we had a QB matchup of Josh Dobbs on his first week with the team and Taylor Heineke, and that game produced more offense than Tua versus Patrick Mahomes.
That's right.
The Chiefs and the Dolphins game was a dud for fantasy purposes with, the 2 best offenses in the league, and then 2 guys who've been sitting on the couch. Well, I guess Josh Dobbs has been sitting on the couch, but Taylor Heineke's been on the bench for the entire season. He comes in, starts his first game. Josh Dobbs starts his first game, and they're lighting it up. They're diving for first downs. They're doing everything they can to get a win. And that was probably one of the, outside the Texans game, the most entertaining game of the week for me. So both those teams, Atlanta and Minnesota, kind of in weird positions, and you don't really know what's going to happen for fantasy, especially with Atlanta, because one week it will be Bijan Robinson, 25 points. The next week, 2. And one week, Jonnu Smith will look like Shaden Sharp and Travis Kelce combined into one, taking screen passes for 70 yards. And the next week, he'll have 1 catch. So I don't really know what to do for fantasy purposes, but it's really entertaining to watch.
Man, I whiffed on Darren Waller this year. He's now injured. It's a nightmare. However, I've been starting Jonnu Smith, and he's been a little up and down. But this week, I mean, that was a huge catch he had, 60 yards or something. I mean, it was outrageous. Then he slipped. Did you see him slip in the tunnel? It's like, easy, Jonnu. Let's go. Come on, man. I need you to get back out there. What are we doing here? So big day for him. But you mentioned Atlanta. A lot of shenanigans there. I mean, did Drake London, he didn't play, right? He was out.
No, he was out.
So Mac Hollins is like, okay. But I mean, they have like no other receivers. And then Tyler Algier is a good running back. Like, he's solid. And so they've been using him, and Bijan's just hasn't been the elite top 5 running back, top 10 running back that everybody thought he would be. And that's the risk with rookies. You can't draft him in the first round. It's just, I know the evidence was there with, Saquon Barkley or Zeke or, different guys that have come in and burst onto the scene, but Robinson's tough. So it's one of those things, though, that maybe at the end of the year, if Atlanta it's like, how do they respond if they are out of playoff contention? Do they say, hey, we love Robinson, but we're going to save him for next year? Or do they say, hey, we want to really utilize him down the stretch? So it's kind of a very confusing, sort of nightmarish situation for Bijan owners at this point. So it's kind of wild in Atlanta. I'm not real bought into the Falcons and my fantasy teams, other than I got the one Jonnu Smith roster. The other team, a lot of shenanigans, the Rams. And this was another team I've kind of been out on. I was talking to Luke earlier, and Cooper Kupp's been not great for him. Kyron Williams looks like he will be back at some point soon, so that could help. What do you make of the Rams and kind of that was an ugly game on Sunday?
Yeah, it really ugly. And you kind of have to think that if Matthew Stafford is not playing for the Rams, no one on that team is startable for fantasy, really. Like, I even with Cooper Kupp, like, it's hard to put Cooper Kupp on your bench, but I just don't see Cooper Kupp going for 8 catches for 100 yards with whoever they have playing quarterback if it's not Matthew Stafford.
Ripon?
I think so.
Ripon?
Like Puka Nacua, I mean, he's not really going to do anything. Tutu Atwell's had some games, but he hasn't been super involved. And then from the running game as well, if they know they can't throw the ball, then they're just going to stack the box every time. And, Henderson wasn't really able to get it going. I don't know if Kyron Williams will have any luck when he comes back if Stafford's not there. So it's a really tough situation because when Stafford plays, the Rams aren't necessarily good, but there's a lot of fantasy value there. Like we saw early in the season with how great Williams was, how great Puka was, how great Cooper Kupp was for a few weeks. But if he's not playing, it's hard to then take those guys out of your lineup because they've become staples and you're counting on them. That's almost what you have to do because I don't expect them to put up more than 13 points in any game that Stafford doesn't play.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And at some point, they're just not going to bring Stafford back either. I mean, because Seattle, I guess Seattle lost. Yeah, I mean, that division still, it's kind of a weird division. But San Francisco's lost 3 in a row. But you'd think San Francisco would pull away in that division. So what are the Rams playing for? Anyway, that's kind of, I was going to save this for the end of the show. But what I'm convinced of this week, and it will go out later today in the Fantasy Football Fellowship Weekly, is as fantasy managers, we have to really look ahead toward the end of the season and how teams handle their veterans. Because when teams are out of playoff contention, there is no reason to play veterans like Matthew Stafford. That it's Super Bowl or bust for him at this point in his career. So he's not going to be out there just slinging it around. No, they're going to try other stuff or play for draft picks or whatever. Teams all have to make those types of decisions. And so we have to realize, okay, over the next few weeks, we're fighting for the playoffs. And so we want the best lineup possible. Then we have to look ahead. If we are going to make the playoffs, we got to have players that are going to be out on the field playing in meaningful games down the stretch. Those are the ones that are going to produce for us. We also have to consider rookies that will then be given the opportunity late in the season, like a Tyjae Spears. At some point, the Titans, if they're out of contention, they go, man, we love Will Levis. Henry's not going to be a part of our future. Let's get Spears even more volume. So those are the kind of things that we have to, and we'll try to help you over the next couple of weeks, figure out and identify some of those players and some of those players to be worried about too. But anyway, I think the Rams would fall into that category of concern there. Same with Cooper Kupp. It's like, he may not be right. You may have to just shut him down again. And that's a big concern. So anyway, that's my,
I think there's a couple more teams like that too, where you look at the Giants, obviously.
Oof.
The Giants should just take a knee every single snap for the rest of the season to get the highest pick possible. There is nothing worth saving on that team. The Patriots should probably do something similar.
Yep.
The Raiders squeaked out a win this week. I know they're all fired up. It's a different locker room. They might try to compete, but when does that, honeymoon phase with the new head coach sort of run out and they realize, okay, we're not actually going to make a playoff push with this team and Aiden O'Connell at QB. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what teams sort of pack it in for the rest of the season and which ones, maybe accelerate down the stretch, because a game that would be a 50-50 game now between two contenders is actually a game between one contender and one team that's tanking. So they now have some easier wins at the end of their schedule. Like a team like the Seahawks, might play the Cardinals and they thought, okay, well, this is going to be a decent game. But if the Cardinals are packing it up, could be an easy win sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's part of the strategy down the stretch. No question about it. Because we only have a few more weeks before the fantasy playoffs begin. It's go time. So it's exciting. All right, let's do a little bit of accountability and confession. And I have to begin because I'm in this league I've been in for 20 years, and my keeper, we get to keep two guys. You know who I kept this year in the 5th round? Cam Akers. Cam Akers. I already told you about my frustration with the Rams and them trading him away. Well, now you feel bad for him. He got hurt again with another Achilles injury. So I totally whiffed on Akers a couple weeks ago. I said, hey, he's going to have a big second half of the season, and I didn't anticipate injury. He actually looked pretty good for the Vikings. When given opportunity, he played well. But it almost ends his career at this point. I mean, it's very, very sad. So I whiffed on him. I went against the veteran running backs this year. So I did not target Josh Jacobs. I did not target Joe Mixon. And they haven't been great, but they did play well this past week. And maybe Josh Jacobs plays better now that McDaniels is gone. The jury's still out. The Raiders, one game against the Giants. We can't draw any conclusions yet. Jacoby Myers has been solid all year, but Jacobs did play well. So I got to admit that I was, a little wrong on that. And then Mixon, he's been okay. And here's what I realized too. Cincinnati's awesome. Their offense is doing well. Their backup running backs, though, if Mixon did go down, aren't worth worrying about. I was carrying one of their guys, Williams, for a little bit on one of my rosters. I'm not doing it. They're not running the ball well enough, and I don't think those guys are strong enough to come in and replace. It would be a committee. So anyway, I would avoid the Bengals backfield. Just load up on their receivers, their tight ends, Joe Burrow's back, baby, all of that. Anything you'd like to acknowledge, confess?
Yeah, I mentioned it a few weeks ago, and this was my strategy for the whole season, was to go in on the top tight ends early in drafts because you wanted that, sure thing. Except now we're starting to see that the top tight ends really aren't a sure thing. They have been for the first 8 weeks of the season, but what happened to Travis Kelce this week? Mark Andrews has been good still, which is nice, as I have him in a few leagues, but Darren Waller, pretty much done for the season now. Dallas Goedert's also injured. So it's actually the late round flyer tight ends who have been the ones that are producing at a really elite level. You look at the top scoring tight ends from this last week: Cole Kmet, Dalton Schultz, Cade Otton, Jonnu Smith, Taysom Hill, who we've mentioned a few times. He's like the tight end 6 now on the year, even though he doesn't play tight end for many of the possessions that they have on offense. He kind of plays quarterback, fullback, I don't even know, but he scores touchdowns every week somehow. But yeah, that's the biggest thing for me is I've missed out on a lot of this late round value, because if you grabbed one of these guys with like the last pick in your draft and you were able to get a top 10 tight end out of it and also keep your 3rd or 4th round pick and use that as a top receiver, you are in a great position right now. Whereas if you took Darren Waller in the 4th round, it's pretty much been a wasted draft pick.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, absolutely. He's killed me in two leagues. The Packers tight end, his name escapes me at the moment, finally played well. What's his name? Musgrave. Yep. Luke Musgrave. I hung on to Musgrave. I got Kelce, Waller, and Musgrave in the Unpacking It league, and I was hesitant with Musgrave. I was like, I don't know. He's kind of been a little slow to produce lately. Woo, a nice game on Sunday. Gives you some hope. Now with Waller out, now I can kind of utilize him a little bit. So I feel good about that. All right, let's do a little bandwagon riding. How about that?
Get off the bandwagon.
It's time for bandwagon riding. Getting on, getting off. Make up your mind, all right?
Speaking of tight ends, The Saints, yes, have Taysom Hill, and he's been playing tight end, and he's been doing well. But my boy Juwan Johnson is back. He is back in the mix. It is time to jump on that bandwagon. I was on it. I was off. I'm back on. So he got into the end zone. 5 catches. Let's see, about 14 points. So I was pleased to see him back out there. He's on waivers. I don't think he's on any rosters right now. He is worth going after. Again, I am on the Saints bandwagon. I can't say it enough. They're going to win the NFC South. They're going to continue to win. They're going to continue to produce. Derek Carr's flinging it all over the field. He didn't have to throw as much on Sunday. They didn't need him to. But that's what he's capable of. They got the weapons. They're in good shape. So Juwan, add that to the list. Let me throw out 2 names for you. You mentioned Cole Kmet, so I assume you're on his bandwagon. And then also Aaron Jones. We've been waiting for him to get healthy. Green Bay. Was this a one-hit wonder for him, or do you feel like, all right, we're back on the bandwagon for him?
I'm not sure where I stand on Aaron Jones and the Packers as a whole, because at the beginning of the season, we were both high on the Packers. They looked good. Jordan Love was playing well. Romeo Dobbs was playing well. But now they've kind of sputtered the last few weeks. Injuries. No one's really been consistent for them. I don't think I would go in on Aaron Jones. I don't think I would trade for him. If he's on your roster already, then obviously this is a good sign. But I would not be getting on the Aaron Jones bandwagon. I'd either be staying off or staying on, but I don't think I'd be making any real decisions about it.
All right, so Arizona, kind of a disastrous season overall, but it was expected. It was almost what they wanted. They're trying to load up on players. I have to confess, I didn't think Kyler Murray would come back this year.
I did not either.
I was not buying that, and I thought it was silly that I knew he was on certain rosters, like people were waiting for him to come back. I'm not sure that I'm still buying into, he's going to come back and be awesome, but I think you might be. Are you jumping on the Cardinals bandwagon?
I am going to jump on the Cardinals bandwagon for the rest of the year. Here's why. I don't think he's going to come back and be awesome, but I think the reason he is coming back is because I think he knows in the back of his head that if he does not prove something to this coaching staff this year, Caleb Williams or Drake May will be the starting quarterback for the Cardinals next year.
That's right.
I think he's coming back, and even if he's going to be great or not great, he is going to be slinging the ball all over the field, showing that he's a quarterback you can win with and can put up stats with. He's got something to prove. If he didn't, he would still be, rehabbing for the rest of the season. And I think that's going to go really well for the rest of the Cardinals receivers. Cardinals are going to be losing in games. Hollywood Brown, Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson's a guy who was a huge waiver wire ad earlier in the season after he had his huge 2-touchdown game, but has now found himself back on waivers because he's been kind of disappointing for the rest of the year. He's the deep threat. He's the young guy that they're going to give playing time to see if there's something that he can do. Same thing with Trey McBride, the tight end there down the stretch. I think Kyler's going to go out and try to showcase what he's capable of. I think the Cardinals are going to put up points, and some of these guys who are on waivers are going to have really solid end of the year finishes because he's got to throw to someone. Everyone's making plays to show that they deserve a roster spot on this team next year. That, if you're the Cardinals, hey, why don't we just draft Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison with our 2, top picks that we're going to have from the trades? Everyone's fighting for their job going into the next season. I think it's going to be really beneficial for a lot of fantasy managers.
All right. It was a convincing take. I'm not sure that it convinces me enough to run to the waiver wire for Cardinals players, but I'm not a Kyler guy, but we'll see. With the new coaching staff, it will be interesting, no doubt about it. All right, let's get to our waiver wire segment, and we'll wrap up the show with this. We like to ask the question, is he legit? And we must begin with the Baltimore Ravens and this rookie running back that I mentioned on this show a few weeks ago, and I put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and I picked him up before the game. That's right. Keaton Mitchell, 20.4 fantasy points.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Oh, yeah. He's the rookie, baby, from ECU. And you love Gus Edwards. You were all in on Gus Edwards, and he's been solid. Touchdowns. But what's exciting about Mitchell is he should go past Justice Hill. He's more talented. He's faster. And so we want Ravens running, like the running game with how well they're playing right now. They're relying on it. Go get Keaton Mitchell. No question about it. Is he legit?
He is definitely legit. This is something for me where we were talking about being on the bandwagon. I've very much been on the Gus bus this season for Gus Edwards, 5 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. But I don't think Keaton Mitchell detracts from Gus Edwards at all. I think this is a very similar situation to what we saw at the Dolphins earlier in this season, where Devon A-Chain's explosive. All you got to do is get him, 7-8 touches a game, and he's going to produce. But Mostert's still going to be the guy. I think Gus Edwards is still going to be the goal line guy, still going to be the short yardage guy. You can start him every week with confidence. But I would go out and get Keaton Mitchell as well, because he has that ability to have 100 yards on only 5 touches in a game and be absolutely explosive. I think he's an absolute must-add.
Yes, he'll be the waiver wire darling this week. What about in Dallas? Jalen Tolbert, 13.9 fantasy points.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
What do you think? Is he legit?
I do not think he is legit, just because I don't think any receiver outside of CeeDee Lamb right now in Dallas is really worth having. We saw a couple good weeks from Brandon Cooks, and then this week he only has 1 catch. Michael Gallup's been hit or miss all season. Jalen Tolbert now. I mean, Dak Prescott is giving CeeDee Lamb the full Cooper Kupp treatment from a few years ago, where it's every single play is CeeDee Lamb. He has been lighting it up, and I've been happy about it as a CeeDee Lamb owner. But yeah, I don't think there's really another pass-catching option outside of Jake Ferguson, the tight end, but another receiver that's really worth having in Dallas if it's not CeeDee Lamb.
All right, 2 more. The first one, I guess the background here is Will Levis is playing well. I've got to say, I wasn't a Will Levis guy coming in. I'm not a big Titans guy, but I've been impressed. Even in the loss the other night on Thursday night, I was impressed. So with that said, they've got a wide receiver who had 4 catches, 68 yards, Kyle Phillips.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Is he legit?
I think Kyle Phillips is legit. I was a huge fan when he was drafted last year, but never really got an opportunity just because the Titans were so bad. But he's a second-year receiver.
Got injured last year, too.
He did, yes. But yeah, 4 catches for 68 yards. Traylon Burks is now out. We don't really know how much time he is going to miss. But that opens up the number 2 receiver role for Phillips in this offense. And he's just a guy that knows how to play wide receiver. He's not the fastest. He's not the biggest. But just like a Julian Edelman or a Danny Amendola, he knows how to get open. He's going to be a PPR monster, and he'll be the safety blanket underneath for Will Levis, who, again, has been playing very well, and I expect to continue to play well and not let go of this starting job for the rest of the season, even if Tannehill is healthy.
I'm with you. I like Kyle Phillips. I'm going to try to snag him. Not that you have to spend a ton of waiver wire dollars to get him, but I think he's worth adding to the roster for sure. All right, last one. Tanner Hudson.
Come on, seriously, who is that? Come on, are you going to tell me who that is?
Cincinnati Bengals tight end. How many tight ends do they have, by the way? But is he legit?
I do not think Tanner Hudson is legit. He did have a nice game this weekend, but going into that game, he only has 4 career receptions, which he had 4 this game, so doubled it in one game. But one guy who is convinced that he is legit is Chris Collinsworth. I'm not sure if you were watching that game, but Chris Collinsworth, Tanner Hudson had 1 catch for like 5 yards on the opening drive. And Chris Collinsworth goes out and says, here's a guy, he reminds me a lot of Travis Kelce with some of the things that he does.
Wow. Bold.
Pretty bold take there from Chris Collinsworth on a guy who's had 4 catches in his career to get the Travis Kelce comparison. I don't think we're going to see much from Tanner Hudson. He'll have a few catches here and there. If he does turn out to be the next Travis Kelce, I mean, Chris Collinsworth called it first. But I do not have the same confidence that he does in Tanner Hudson.
He sounds like a CW character on one of these shows. So I don't know about Tanner Hudson. He's living on Laguna Beach or something. But We'll wait on that. We'll wait on Tanner Hudson. So just go get Keaton Mitchell this week, and you'll be happy. That's the guy to get on waivers heading into week. What are we heading into? Week 10. Week 10. Here we go. It's exciting. All right. Well, thanks to everybody for listening. Harrison, great insight from you as always. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm Bryce. I'm a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected. And through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well. And I hope you'll join me as we live life as fantasy managers and sports fans who follow Jesus together. Go check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Go read the breakout as we talk about encouragement and living for God's glory and living for his approval versus anybody else's approval. We want to please God. We want to please God. And thankfully, we rest in Jesus and all that he's done for us. And not that we have to prove anything to God. We rest in Jesus, but we want to live our lives in response to him. And so that's the encouragement today. So have a great one. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast.